The Demon in the Mirror. Mirrors have always unnerved me. Something about seeing yourself perfectly duplicated, a silent, frozen replica of every movement, every blink, every expression, feels unnatural. They are gateways, not to another world, but to something deeper, darker. At least, that's what I've come to believe. It started in the old manor my family had inherited from my great-aunt Eleanor, a grand, Gothic estate on the outskirts of Ravenwood. The house was beautiful, but disconcerting, its halls filled with creaking floorboards and an oppressive stillness. The centerpiece of the manor was a massive, ornate mirror in the drawing room. Its gilded frame was intricately carved with images of snarling faces and clawed hands reaching upward, as though they were trying to escape the gold. Just a decoration, my father had said when I asked about the grotesque design. Eleanor had peculiar tastes, but there was something about that mirror, something alive. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was my imagination. I was dusting the mirror, the pale sunlight streaming through the window and glinting off its polished surface. As I wiped away the layer of grime, I caught a flicker of movement, not mine, but something else, deeper within the glass. I froze, my breath fogging the mirror. "Hello," I whispered, though I didn't expect an answer. The reflection stared back, empty and silent. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Shadows play tricks in an old house, and mirrors are notorious for creating illusions. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me. 2 weeks passed before the mirror showed its true nature. I was alone in the house, my parents having gone to a charity gala in town. The storm outside raged with violent winds and torrential rain. I had settled into the drawing room, a blanket draped over my shoulders, reading by the flickering light of the fireplace. The mirror loomed behind me, its dark surface reflecting the room in ghostly detail. I don't know what made me glance up, but when I did, my heart stopped. In the mirror, my reflection was gone. The room was still there, the fireplace crackling, the furniture arranged exactly as it was in reality. But I wasn't in it. Instead, a shadowy figure stood where I should have been, tall, impossibly thin, with elongated limbs and a head that seemed to tilt unnaturally to one side. Its face was featureless, save for 2 glowing red slits where its eyes should have been. I spun around, expecting to see it standing behind me, but the room was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, my reflection had returned, looking as terrified as I felt. At first, I convinced myself it was stress. The move to the manor, the adjustment to a new life, it had to be taking a toll on my mind. But the figure didn't stay confined to the mirror. It started small. My reflection would linger for a second too long after I moved, or I'd see something darting across the edges of the glass when I walked by. Then came the whispers, soft, guttural murmurs that seemed to come from deep within the mirror. "Let me in," it would hiss. "I can show you everything." One night, I woke to find the mirror glowing faintly, its surface rippling like water. Drawn by some unseen force, I approached it, my heart hammering in my chest. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Touch the glass," it said. I reached out, my fingers trembling. The moment they made contact, the surface turned ice cold, and a searing pain shot through my hand. I screamed, yanking it back. A black, claw-like mark was burned into my palm. The next day, I confronted my father. "What's wrong with the mirror?" I demanded, shoving my burned hand in his face. He paled, his usual stern demeanor crumbling. "I didn't think it was real," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Just stories." He explained that the mirror had been in our family for generations, passed down like a cursed heirloom. Legend had it that it belonged to a 17th century occultist who had used it to summon a demon. The mirror, he said, was the only thing keeping the entity contained. "But if it's contained," I said, panic rising in my throat, "why is it attacking me?" My father had no answer. Over the following weeks, the attacks intensified. The demon, as I now called it, became bolder. It no longer waited for me to look into the mirror. It appeared in the glass of windows, in the reflection of water, even in the gleaming surface of a kitchen knife. It began to mock me, mimicking my voice, my movements. It knew my fears, my regrets, my darkest thoughts, and it used them against me. "You can't escape me," it would whisper. "I am you." My parents tried to help. They covered the mirror, removed every reflective surface from the house. But it didn't matter. The demon was no longer confined to the glass. It had found a way into our lives. Desperate, I turned to the local historian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hawthorne who had studied the manor's dark history. She told me of a ritual, dangerous, but potentially effective. "The mirror must be destroyed," she said, "but not without trapping the demon. Otherwise, it will be unleashed on the world." The ritual required a blood sacrifice, a binding circle, and an incantation in a language older than time itself. That night, with Mrs. Hawthorne's guidance, my parents and I prepared the ritual. We drew the circle around the mirror, lit black candles, and began the chant. As the incantation filled the room, the mirror trembled violently, its surface cracking like ice. The demon appeared, thrashing against the glass, its monstrous form clearer than ever. "You can't contain me," it roared, its voice shaking the walls. "I will devour you all." The mirror shattered, shards flying in every direction. But instead of breaking free, the demon was sucked into the largest fragment, its screams echoing as it was dragged back into its prison. The shard lay on the floor, glowing faintly. Mrs. Hawthorne picked it up, wrapping it carefully. "This must never see the light of day again," she said. The manor was sold, the mirror's remnants hidden away in a vault deep underground. My family tried to move on, but the experience left scars, both physical and emotional. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in reflective surfaces, shadows that don't belong. The whispers have faded, but they're not entirely gone. The demon is still out there, waiting, and it's only a matter of time before someone finds the shard,